Journey from Good to Great, Intentional Planning, is the third in a four-part series. In the previous videos, we talked about the importance of developing a philosophy, being present, and engaging children in meaningful conversations. In this video, the focus is being intentional when planning for group and individual experiences, extending learning, planning for assessment, and utilizing assessment data to inform teaching practices. Once teachers know their underlying core values and philosophy and are able to slow down and be present with children, powerful interactions can occur. The information gained through these interactions can lead to the development of lesson plans that are meaningful and meet the various abilities of all the children in the classroom. So what do we mean when we say intentional planning? Many of us have heard the term intentional teaching. In her book, The Intentional Teacher, Ann Epstein describes an intentional teacher as someone who has clearly defined learning objectives for children, utilizes a variety of instructional strategies to help children meet learning objectives, and continually assesses progress and makes adjustments based upon that assessment. An intentional teacher is a teacher who can clearly explain the why behind what he or she is doing. When we use the term intentional planning in the context of curriculum, we are referring to being purposeful by planning for experiences that align with individual IEP goals and curriculum goals, as well as taking into account children's interests, abilities, and needs. It is also important for teachers to plan for extending learning through the environment and interactions with children and think about how they will collect assessment in an ongoing way so teaching strategies can be individualized. To help us learn more about intentional planning, we talked to several staff from the Early Childhood Center in Moline. Let's take a look and listen to how the staff from this program goes about intentional planning.
Well, I'm guided by the IEP. I look at what we need to do and then figure out a way to do it. And sometimes it's very creative. I try to change things up quite a bit. I don't let things be predictable. So if there's something that tends to work or I think might work as something new, let's try it. I guess I'm always open to new ideas. Maybe is the best way to can say it for my planning, that I pretty much the sky's the limit and I'll try most anything to get a child to get them to be able to work on their needs that are in the IEP. Some of the accommodations and adaptations I've made for the students, and I do have all mine are on IEP. First of all, I want to say that every little small thing that we accomplish is celebrated in my room. I have several people in there who are nonverbal for the most part. So what we're doing is trying to get them to cue into pictures and make their choices with that. For example, at snack time we have our menu, and what it is just a plastic sleeve kind of thing with two choices on it for what we're having for snack. The other day it would be like Fruit Loops and Ritz cracker kinds of things, and this one little boy, he's got a lot of things working at him, and he isn't communicating with me. Food's very important, but he hadn't been able to communicate what he wanted, and this day we put the menu in front of him and said, "What do you want?" And he pointed to what he wanted. My gosh, I mean, we were excited. That was big because he was communicating with us. We've made a start, and we've had to work through a lot of behavior. So I like to celebrate, in addition to using adaptations, I like to celebrate those small things because those small things will keep adding up into big things. With their interests and life experiences, I do a lot of observing, I guess, of the child, and that's when they first come into the program. Talking with the parents is important and knowing what things the child has been interested in. If this is their very first first person they see for general or for education, I talk with the parents, but then I observe the child because I found that kids don't always, what the parents say they've done at home is an indicator, but sometimes when they come to school, the child views that as their own world. Even if they're very limited on their language or their social skills, there are things they want to learn about. So the observation is a key place for me to start, to see what they go to see what they're ready to learn. And then when I see what they're ready or they're interested in, then yeah, I can tie it into, like for social things. If I see somebody is trying to learn how to play with somebody, then we provide experiences where, oh, we bring in a lot of new toys, we'll shift things in so they have different things to play with, and then start adding in another person so they're playing with another person, sharing materials.
So I think flexibility is definitely a crucial part in planning. I do consider the standards when I'm creating my lesson plans, because those are my goals for the day. Planning is a very important piece of teaching. You need to be intentional in your teaching. You need to make sure that you're accomplishing your goals for each student. What does this child need? What would benefit this child? You need to think about the children. If I need to change an activity, I'm okay with that. I'm not stuck in one way to present an activity or to complete an activity.
When I sit down, things I think about when I sit down to make my plans, I think about topics that might be current if we're, depending on the time of the year, if we're studying something outside. Right now we're studying caterpillars, and seeds and growing things. It'll have a lot to do with where we're going on field trips, field experiences. We went to the Botanical Center. So we are growing bean seeds. We've grown grass seeds. So we're seeing certain things grow really fast. Some take longer to develop, longer to grow. We're studying caterpillars right now. We've watched them when they first came in as a tiny caterpillar. They're now in chrysalis, and so we're counting to see how many days it will take them to after they've gone in their chrysalis, to turn into a butterfly. So sometimes it's a children's interest too. I have some boys that are very interested in buildings, so I try to bring in pictures of buildings. We sit down and they write their plans, so we're talking about what architects do. So they have their own blueprint, and then they use that blueprint to make their building, and then we go back and we look at it, we take pictures of it, they explain what they've done that day. Sometimes it's working on what they might need to do, like language development. Maybe some child really needs some help with their social skills. So those are the kinds of things I think about, when making my plans. The considerations that I make for planning the environment would include the topics that we are studying, make sure that I have a center where those things are out. I want to make sure that there are materials that the children are interested in as well. I also want materials out that they might not know what they are, but that might spark some interest, some questioning. So we'll have to do some investigating that way. So I try to have some familiar things out, some ones that are new and maybe not as familiar. So it will have some different things, different directions for those things to go.
I have the benchmarks posted in my classroom in each center. So Dramatic Play has their own list, Blocks has a list. We discovered that they were interested in a vet clinic, and so we had gone to the Family Museum, and we came back and we talked about what we liked doing at the museum, and then we ended up taking the top 3 and voting, and they chose a vet clinic. I brought in clothes and different tools and animals, and we had a table where we had a pretend sink so they could wash the animals. It did take a lot of planning on my part, but it was well worth it.
An example of how I've helped the children expand their knowledge we developed a store, and we talked about things that they might see when they go into a store, the different things, bracelet, like a department store or Target. They talked about the different departments. There's a department for jewelry, there's a department for books. We had a hat department, so clothing, that kind of thing. And then we sat down and we had store meetings, and we tried to decide, well, how could we develop all these things for our store? So we were building on their knowledge already of what they knew about the store, and then we were trying to bring it over to be able to put it in the classroom and making those items. Then we decided, okay, we have all these items, we would like to market them to the children in the school. So then we put together, we cut money. We decided, well, they need money to buy things. We need to price things so they know how much they have to pay. And we developed, for each classroom, they sent out a bag of money for the children to come. We advertised at what time the store was open. Their parents came in and participated in it as well. They had their money that the children had brought home. So it really was a great experience. We had this whole school involved. We had their families involved. And we just built on their knowledge of what they know about a store when they go in. They were engaged with that for probably 3 weeks, if not longer. This afternoon group, my older children were doing that. And we had everybody was involved in some way. And we even had, when we opened the store, we even had a store manager that went around to see if they could help people. What can I help you find? And he checked with each department to find out, do you need something? Do you need more merchandise? You know, so it was great. They got to know the roles of people that people have in the stores. All the benchmarks that came alive during that store, those are the ones that I posted outside. So I saw things from language arts, I saw lots with math, saw a lot of social development. Children that had been playing alongside each other for a long time, they were starting to collaborate on something. And that was wonderful to see. And now I see more of it now after the store is over. I see more small groups of children playing together. That just kind of helped, I think, bring a lot of things together for some of them.
This morning I extended the children's learning in the discovery area. We had a sink or float activity. We started out reading the book Sink or Float, and we had lots of new vocabulary words. So we talked about those words, asked lots of questions, you know, why did this sink? Why did this float? So we talked about why these things happened. And then we tried it out with some materials, some of the materials that were in the book, some of the materials that were just on the shelf right behind us. So we tested them to see if they were sinking or floating. And then I had the children go and find, this is how I extended the activity, I went and had them look around the room to see if they could find something that would float. And then they went and chose something that they thought would sink.
Some of the tools that I use to scaffold their thinking, when I'm talking with them, I think about where they are, and then I try to decide. Okay, sometimes it's a split-second decision. Okay, what have they said where I can take it another direction or take it up a step? So I looked to the children for clues to help me figure out where I can take the next step.
In planning in my classroom, I look at the indirected and directed strategies that I can use. When a new skill is introduced, there's a lot more directed teaching than the indirected. And as the skill goes on, then they are able to do it by themselves. So if I add a new manipulative math counting game, we will work with it for several days with me being there helping. And then the next couple days I'll step back and watch just to be there in case they need some guidance.
It's important, I think, for the parents to realize the benchmarks that we are working on and what the children are learning through their play. I think sometimes parents don't realize that we are doing these things and they are learning such wonderful skills in all these different areas.
I have a notebook that's out every day in the middle of the room, and every day I write my anecdotal records on that, and my aide assistant writes on that too. As far as assessment, I take data most of the time on them. There's a lot of detail to it, and I know I tend to look at probably the broader picture, the bigger picture, so I don't want to drive myself nuts in trying to come back down to more detail, but I know that it's important to do rather than just trying to get the big big overall general picture. I find that as a challenge for me, because some days with friends I have, some days we're on the mark and we're ready, and some days things have happened at home and we don't do well with that. So when I get information, like say on colors from the child, I keep note of how many times they do name the colors for me, and it's a daily basis. My records are a daily basis, and then I go back and look at them and kind of fill in where it all fits in the big, thick picture.
I sit with the children and observe what they're doing. You can hear lots of counting and colors and those kinds of skills being done just through conversation with themselves, with me, or with other children. You can also just watch of the interaction that's going on between the children, of how they build and the thoughts they're having as they build or as they do that puzzle. And watching the children get out name cards and practice writing their names, all done just through observation and on their own.
We have benchmarks like the new one we just received, and I would take Post-it notes and put them on each page or whatever particular benchmarks we were working on those days, and I just put a kid's initials beside it if I saw them, what level they were on that or what they were working on, say interacting with another student. I would mark down, okay, so-and-so is doing it, or they're at level whatever 6 or whatever it is on it, or no, this one's not there yet, but this is where we are.
Planning for assessment, I use my camera a lot. I know that there are certain things. I know, as an example today, I wanted to get a picture of the chefs. So I know certain things that I plan ahead of time what I'm going to put in. That will go to their portfolio. It will help know about their sentence length, their language development, if they can answer questions. They're drawing pictures about these things too, so we get a sense of their fine motor skills. They write their name and they sign their work, so we see their literacy skills, their name, how far along they are in writing their name. Pictures I take, I use the camera a lot, and that really helps me remember what they've done. I can look at the picture and I can say, oh yes, that's when they did that. Sometimes my peers will hear a remark that one of the children have made, and they'll write it down, and they'll help me that way, because I don't hear everything. I certainly don't see everything that goes on in the classroom, so I do depend on feedback from my paras. So that's really how I plan for and how I do my assessment.
I reflect pretty much after the activity is completed, or a large group, after we're done with a large group. I pretty much know whether or not I want to use this activity again or use the story again. Is the story too long? Is it not engaging enough? So I'll probably scrap it and just put it in the book area. The activity, if I don't have a lot of interest, then I will find a way to modify the activity and make it more interesting, more exciting, so that next time I have the activity available, more friends will come over and join me.
With the in-services that we've been to concerning lesson planning, I have really noticed more how I focus on each part of the day. And with having a blended classroom, how I can specifically make their goals within my day without being obvious to them. I can get that in with it doesn't just have to be a small group time, that you could slide in accounting if that's a goal that one of my students has. You can do that when you line up to go home or when you're lining up to go to the gym. And so they're getting those goals during those times.
I've noticed that after looking through that and having our discussions with you folks, that I look at things much more reflectively. And I'm pretty good about that anyway, but I see there are more things, even more things I can do to help the kids even more. That was big for me, I think, from it. I have a wide range of ages in my room and abilities. Some of the children range from like 9 months to up to 5 years, not chronologically, but how they're working. And I think sometimes I've not maybe been as specific for each one. I've taught more to the general. And with this, I went, oh, I need to look at each one a little bit more closely. I said I do it, but even more so now, and I think it's made me a better teacher.
As you can see from listening to the staff at the Early Childhood Center in Moline, There are multiple factors to consider in the development of an engaging classroom that challenges, while at the same time allows each child to be successful in meeting group and individual goals. Curriculum planning is an ongoing cyclical process that involves planning, implementation, observation, assessment, and reflection. Without all components, the cycle will become off-kilter, which could lead to a dead end. Let's take a closer look at the considerations for planning. High-quality preschool classrooms have teachers that utilize developmentally appropriate practices as their guide. Are the activities and experiences being provided age-appropriate? Have I taken into account individual learning styles, interests, and IEP goals? What about the social and cultural context of the children? How will children and families be represented in the experiences and materials throughout the classroom? Have I thought about and planned for how curriculum goals, IEP objectives, and Illinois Early Learning and Development standards can be embedded across routines in a well-organized, child-centered environment? Have I developed a system for an ongoing assessment and planned for how and when to collect data across various routines and activities? Taking all these components into consideration will set you on the right path as you move into implementation. During the implementation phase, teachers utilize a variety of strategies to ensure children are engaged and that teachable moments are used to extend learning. Teachers are able to guide the curriculum by providing a variety of hands-on materials that provide many choices for engagement and high-level play. Teachers involve themselves in the children's play, following their cues and interests, while asking themselves, what is the right content to teach during this interaction? Can I add a material to their existing play that provides a new challenge for them? Is this an opportunity to introduce new vocabulary? Should I engage in conversation and higher-level questioning to learn more about the child's thought process? How can I scaffold the child's learning and help support new ideas and content development by connecting prior knowledge to new knowledge? Taking a moment to think about the child's prior experiences and where the child is currently at in their development will help guide teachers in taking the next step in building the child's knowledge in a meaningful way. While implementing small and large group activities, teachers use their plans as a guide while also being flexible and allowing children to drive the activity while still reaching the planned outcome. It is important for teachers to observe and collect information so children's progress can be assessed and teachers can assess their teaching strategies as well. The assessment process is systematic and ongoing, meaning it reflects the child's ability over time rather than a one-time snapshot. Many teachers utilize note cards, post-it notes, cameras, sketches, handheld devices, and matrices to keep a record of development over time. Teachers who have been intentional in their planning and have set up a rich learning environment will find assessment can occur authentically as children navigate the environment and teachers facilitate play. The information collected drives planning and is used as a springboard for reflection. Most teachers utilize reflection both in action, thinking while implementing, and on action, thinking after implementation and observation. The goal of reflection is to lead to the development of appropriate accommodations, adjustments, and individualization, as well as informed decisions for next steps. Reflection provides teachers the opportunity to figure out what is working, what is not working, and why. While reflecting on observation notes, it is helpful to pose questions. What did I learn about this child or this group of children's development? What have I learned about the effectiveness of my teaching practices? Are there any children who need additional supports, and what should those supports look like based upon what I have observed? What adjustments can I make or materials can I add to the environment to support the next steps for the children? Having the opportunity to pause and reflect on previous experiences continues the process for intentional planning. While this cyclical process guides us in the implementation of curriculum, we must remember being present and building relationships with children, families, and colleagues will lead to more effective outcomes when planning. If you have not yet viewed the first two videos in this series, It Begins With You and Conversations, we encourage you to do so. Please join us in the last video in this series titled Pulling It All Together as we listen to the staff from the Jefferson Early Childhood Center reflect on their journey from good to great. Our hope is that this video has prompted you to think about your current planning process and what areas you can build upon. Remember, it is a journey, and each family and child we meet helps us learn there are multiple paths leading to success.